Hello my friends. Zach Saxton here in beautiful Forest Park in St. Louis, and I've found this beautiful bench, and I think it will be perfect to display some of this information that I wrote down recently about some pretty interesting philosophical contemplations. And this is pretty intense stuff, so I would say if you're easily overwhelmed or not wanting to think about some kind of like foreign, intense philosophical ideas, perhaps turn back now. It's all written with good intention, and like everything, I only want to really speak what's necessary to bring good things into the world. So I don't mean to impose if these ideas are overwhelming or anything, because it touches on some relevant biblical analogies. But I don't personally feel that this is necessarily of fact value. So anyhow, it's some interesting, perplexing ideas that I've considered. So let us begin. And as the video is titled, this is essentially focused on the experience of duality, the oscillation that our awareness seems to go through in the experience of duality, night and day. All these different things, all the coming and going of different things, sleep cycle and wake cycle, and ultimately what it could be fathomed to be like, what it could be conceived as mentally for us to step outside of linearity and experience something beyond it. So let us begin. So let's consider for a second that now, okay, we've got now right here, everything we experience as now, okay? So now is inherently holding both yin and yang energies, both the inherent dualistic polarities that are here in our creation, okay? So night and day, sleep cycle, wake cycle, eat, digest, everything has shifting polarities. We go to wealth, we go to being poor, we're going to be happy, we go to being sad, there's these inherent polarities everywhere. But we experience them all in what we experience as a now, okay? So sleeping is a now, right? Your dream is experienced essentially linearly, and your waking cycle is essentially linearly, and they're all contained in what you would perceive consciously as a now, okay? I don't mean to dwell on this, but that's an important point, okay? So, and then let's theorize that there's something after the now, okay? So what I'm really going to get to, the rest of this is just 4 pages of writing, I'm just going to read it through. But essentially what we're trying to conceive here is that it's easy to consider that yin and yang and night and day and all these things are held within now, but let's consider the most vast of the dualistic references that we have as conscious observers in a functioning biological body. And the most vast one that I can consider of direct implication to our existence is life and death. So that's where this really gets into, and the idea, I'll just begin reading it, and you guys can take what you will from it, and maybe I'll interject on the way. So let's consider that we experience now as a continually undulating oscillation, rebounding between polarities. Now, let's consider that now is a dimension, okay? It's a dimensional reference, okay? So like we're existing, we're looking through the now, okay? So let's consider that. And as we come to grips with this coexisting coalescence of yin and yang within the now, okay? The unified and completed, undifferentiated comes into view, okay? So that's the essential framework. And this model is biblical in implication to me in terms of Babylon being transcended and the true Zion being shown after the dissolution of the falsities of Babylon. But it's also directly relevant to Taoist metaphors, Buddhist metaphors, essentially a lot of wisdom, I think. So let's go on. What if our whole life is existent in a continuum perceived through the lens of duality, okay, which invokes a sequential perspective, but life as a whole is not bound to the linearity. We as observers, souls, possibly spirits, watch as day and night burst one another anew. We watch as the cycles commence. Slowly, we begin to make sense of the unified nature of these polarities. But one, the life and death duality, is particularly difficult to make sense of due to the immensity of its wave pattern. And what I mean by the immensity of the wave pattern of life and death, meaning that the life side of the coin encompasses all recollectible lucid information, and the death side of the coin theoretically would encompass an infinite mystery. It's something that is essentially beyond our conscious awareness. So that's a pretty big wave pattern. So it's easy to get night and day. It's easy to see all these different flows, but it's pretty hard to grasp that one. That's the one that triggers these existential concerns when we start to look at it. It can also trigger existential realization of substance and connection with the divine source, I believe. Where did I go? Okay. Through what we would identify as three-dimensional, through what we as three-dimensional observers would identify as being the alchemical refinement process of basically making our being more and more harmonious, cleaning ourselves out of the things that we know are wrong. Through this alchemical refining process, we slowly expand our awareness to encompass a connection to this final expansive duality of life and death, okay? Because in my experience, the more that my mind is caught in the fickle, the more that my being is cluttered with things, the more that this life and death duality is either very overwhelming to ponder on or something I can't even make sense of. Just kind of evades me. And it's kind of interesting if you think about these archetypes of spiritual teachers and different people through time who come to understand this eternal nature. So this is what the whole point of my writing is, essentially, is trying to understand the nature of being an eternal being here, existing in this duality, and what else we could be experiencing also. So through this, the after could possibly come into view or come into manifest. And what I mean is after being not just after life, but after life, after death, after the now, okay? Because if you guys didn't watch this from the beginning, the now is an encompassing sphere in this model, in this wacky model at least. The now is an encompassing sphere which holds the dimensional reference of both life and death. So what we're conceiving now is an after. Again, like I said earlier, the theoretical Zion, the something that would be after life, but after death. The after, okay? Just for the use of this, I'm calling it the after. So let's say we live our lives repeatedly like a dream, echoing through a hallway for an eternity. And I've written some, crazy posts about this recently. But what is after? If our dreams, what if our life is this eternal thing? If we are really eternal beings, then what is after the life? How can that be? As far as we are concerned, it is the afterlife, but I feel it is just because of our inherent unfamiliarity with death. As our awareness begins to understand dualism without reliance on logical associations, meaning life references, we see that life and death have become coexistent. And rather, it has been our own awareness this whole time that has been oscillating. Okay? So, what if it's not that there's a yin and yang that makes the night and day? What if our whole life is coexisting, but it's our awareness, our observation, our being is oscillating in some way, and our awareness shifts between these polarities, and we come into consciousness, dreams and awake, right? Okay. So, moving on, the afterlife is no more afterlife than it is after death in this model. I believe the after to be best understood as an alternative dimension, one whose gate could be guarded by harmonic awareness, which goes into, again, biblical metaphors of the idea of the angel guarding the Garden of Eden with the flaming sword, theologically referenced to be Uriel, which translates to God is my light, which means a pure awareness. in my mind, what that translates to in the Hebrew text. Rather than seeing this as some detached other which is separated from us by time, okay, we need to try to step into a reference where the after is not separated to us by time, but rather it is a dimensional perception. It's a difference in perception, okay? So time is only relevant in the sphere of now. Our perception of time, that linearity, that dream, that oscillation is only relevant in the sphere of now, okay? Which encompasses both life and death in this wacky model. So now, let's say that we're eternal beings and actually there is no death. Like all the ancient people say, like the biblical scriptures say, you know, we're eternal beings somehow, but this life and death is this thing that we're experiencing, okay? Eternal life may be accepting the existence of the creation, accepting your life, accepting your death, more and more and more, until, whoa, something new arises. Something just like waking up. You don't even know when you wake up. You know, you go to sleep and something arises. And then this is tomorrow. This is the theoretical Zion, which could emerge from the state of now, the state of life and death. Like everything is just a vibrating thing for an eternity. Then at a certain point, when our awareness is ready for it, it ripens, and something else comes into view, which is the fruit of the blessing of something that is beyond the Babylon and beyond this struggle, which is something that is referenced in a lot of ancient scriptures and seems to be a prevalent idea around the world. Moving on to the last two pages, anyone who's still here. We sleep and wake, each day awaking to now and sleeping in what we perceive to be a void. It appears linear, and yet, if you woke and it was next year and it wasn't tomorrow, would you really know the difference? If now always feels familiar to you, okay? If now was to always feel familiar to you, and if you had all your logical memories connected to the now, like if you woke up tomorrow and you remembered yesterday, or if you woke up 5 years ago and you remembered every day before that, or if you woke up a year from now and you remembered every day before that, if you had all of that existing in that now just like you do today, is it really necessary to view that you're bound to linearity if you were to accept the possibility that when you do experience the now, anything you're given, any creation that is gifted to you, when you take in your breath, whatever is there, if you experience that as now and you have a logical awareness and you have all the surrounding memories of it, if that was true, then there's no reason to necessarily assume that we are not existing in every moment. Okay? So that's kind of one of the really trippy things that it kind of hinges on it, you know, but I mean, it's all good. I'm not trying to convince you guys of anything. This is just intense ideas I've had. All right. Perhaps the yesterday that you came from was another time, or perhaps this really is a nonlinear dimension which the oscillation of our awareness creates a perceived linearity, and you were always existing in a unified now. Okay? So we're almost getting wrapped up here, I think. I don't really remember all of this, but I scanned it. I know it's nothing I'm afraid to say. After you have endured until the end, as biblical scripture references, an effective eternity or so later relevant to your observation as a biological being, and you finally acknowledge your place as an eternal soul after an eternity of observation, trying to understand what your Zach is or your so-and-so is. What if now ceases or is gone beyond, relevant to our awareness, and the after comes into view? This would be considered the end time, initiated when you have made sense of your own life and are truly ready to awake to something new. Those dreams of the heavenly gardens of the afterlife are not after life, nor after death, but rather they exist beyond the limited scope of our unrefined awareness. I'm going to say that one again, because that's important, and I just screwed the sentence up. those dreams of those heavenly gates, the little glimpses that we have through our life sometimes, those intuitive feelings of the eternalness of what we're connected to, okay, that we all have in religious experiences, spiritual, whatever. These little glimpses are perhaps not after life or after death, but rather they exist beyond the limited scope of our unrefined awareness, at the finish line of this dimensional membrane where we are waiting for ourselves in truth. Are you ready for truth? Are we ready for truth? I don't know, it seems like this kind of stuff makes more sense to me, the scriptures and some of the trippy stuff in reality, just meditating and philosophizing on it seems to make more sense. So, I don't know, I know that I've bitten off more truth than I can chew before, and it takes a little bit to digest. So, I don't know how much truth I'm ready for, but I'm riding this wave and I'm so grateful for every day. And I don't ever seek to acquire more knowledge or wisdom or trippy consideration than is necessary for the development of my purpose to serve selflessly. So, going on to the last page, perhaps we allow forgiveness and we are forgiven, and we watch as truth amounts and the temple of heaven is revealed within as it has always been. We are not waiting, perhaps, for God to return to earth, as there is no future to speak of in this model. We are slowly realizing God's presence on earth for what it has always been. In earth being, essentially maybe our awareness, Okay. This is not a distant day wherein a war ensues on earth. It is the absolute culmination of our own awareness, wherein the full apocalyptic remorse and virtuous purpose becomes visible. Perhaps this threshold is an entirely different reference, one of perfected proportion, and one largely unfathomable to our current limited awareness, until we clear our awareness enough to listen within and hear that beckoning call of God, that eternal, that feeling, that yearning to go towards what we know is right, that I believe is in all of us, called the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it. Natives call it the Great Spirit, It is what it is. When we hear that beckoning call of the divine coming from within, coming from that heavenly place, the heaven within, the temple within, and we get just a glance of it, a whisper, an echo, it is sometimes so powerful that its magnitude... Okay, this is the final sentence. I'll just read this one straight through. The beckoning... Alright, past this threshold is an entirely different reference and one of perfected proportion and largely unfathomable to our current limited awareness, until we clear ourselves enough to listen within and hear the beckoning call of God coming from that heavenly place. And we get just a glance, a whisper, an echo of something so powerful that its magnitude was designed to be contained away from our observation, lest we become frightened and shocked if glancing before our own readiness. And perhaps that is why we are contained in what we do perceive as being a limited, subjective, linear awareness, because it is pretty shocking to observe it. And perhaps we have observed it infinite times before, and we are always skimming the surface of this beyond, this other dimension, if you will, this afterlife, this oneness, this Zion. But perhaps the magnitude of it is very overwhelming for our being. So over time, we slowly begin to, ready ourselves, or just decide that, or, become ready by some outside, objective determination. So, anyhow, as I said in the beginning, it's just a bunch of really intense philosophical thoughts. Arguably manic ones, and fair enough. But, yeah, I just wrote it the other night, like 3 weeks ago. And I thought it was at least interesting enough to throw out there, because it kind of wraps together a lot of ideas for me with, like, obviously biblical analogies, but also just my own experience of yin and yang cycles, as well as my own experience of time and linearity, because time is really such a strange thing, in that at times I do really seem to be limited to this night and day flow, and at other times I do feel in touch with a part of myself that really does feel eternal and really does feel like it is existing in all of them, you know. And that's that place where I really feel that divine connection, and that's that place where I feel my purpose shining. And I think that's why we are called to that light. I feel my purpose there. You know, I feel, you know, it sounds almost wacky, you know, but I feel drawn to something good, something selfless, something pure. And I think that's what the ancient people wrote about with Zion and all this. You know, I don't know that it's a physical thing, you know, I don't know what it is, but we're called, I think, to something beautiful and something pure inside of ourselves. And as we slowly begin to accept the intensity of life and just accept the creation for what it is, accept the intensity, you know, the good, the bad, all of it, you know, I think we can slowly start to listen and hear that and have faith and trust it, you know. And from doing that, I think we can possibly gravitate towards it. And maybe that's what, on an individualized level, the evolution of our consciousness, or, you know, enlightenment or something like that is. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your comments and interest and everything. I'll put this on my YouTube and put other stuff on there too. So if you're interested, I'll tag or put the link on there. So open to criticism, open to refinement, open to being thrown out the window and discarded. You know, it's all good. Just some interesting ideas, you know. And I apologize if they're controversial, but yeah, after I read through it and meditated on it, I think the world can handle it. I love you guys. I wish you all the best.